The email arrived on December 10th. Subject line: Holiday Plans Family Discussion. My father's writing style: formal and detached, treating family communication like corporate memos. Dear Vanessa, after much consideration, your mother and I have decided this year's Christmas celebration will focus on recognizing accomplished family members and their achievements. Given your current life situation and career uncertainty, we feel it would be more comfortable for everyone if you sat this year out. We'll catch up in the new year when things are more settled for you. Best regards, Dad. I read it 3 times, each pass revealing new layers of dismissal. Current life situation. Career uncertainty. More comfortable for everyone. Translation. My older brother Marcus had just made junior partner at his law firm and bought a Porsche. His fiancée came from old money. They were the kind of success story my parents could showcase at the country club, at church, at every social gathering where family status mattered. I was 31, unmarried, working in what my father called that real estate nonsense that he'd never bothered to understand. My mother introduced me to her friends as still figuring things out, her tone apologetic as if my existence required excuses. They didn't know, because they'd never asked, that I'd spent the last 8 years quietly building a commercial real estate portfolio. Didn't know that figuring things out meant acquiring properties across 3 states. Didn't know my net worth had surpassed 8 figures last year. They knew I wore practical clothes instead of designer labels. Knew I drove a 5-year-old Honda instead of leasing luxury vehicles I couldn't afford. Knew I lived modestly in a small house instead of stretching for an impressive address. They'd concluded I was struggling, barely getting by, an embarrassment best hidden during their moment of showcasing Marcus's achievements. My phone rang. Marcus. I let it go to voicemail, then listened. V, about Christmas. Look, I didn't ask them to do this. But maybe it's better? Mom's been planning this huge thing at church and you know how she gets about appearances. Call me back. I deleted the message. Marcus was a good person, genuinely kind, but he'd never understood what it was like to be the invisible child. He'd followed every prescribed step. Prestigious university, law school, corporate partnership track, and received endless validation. When I'd deviated to pursue real estate investment, I'd become a problem to be managed. The family group chat, which I'd muted months ago, showed 47 new messages. I scrolled through. Marcus's engagement photos, my mother's excited responses, my father's rare emoji usage indicating pride. Plans for Christmas Eve service at St. Catherine's Cathedral, followed by dinner at the club. My Aunt Rebecca asking if I'd be there. My mother's response: Vanessa has work commitments this year. Just immediate family. Work commitments. The lie was cleaner than the truth. I walked to my home office, pulled out a file I hadn't reviewed in months. St. Catherine's Cathedral, the Gothic revival masterpiece where my family had attended services for 3 generations. Where Marcus would be baptizing his future children. Where my parents held their social standing like a crown. The cathedral I'd purchased 18 months ago when the diocese sold it to cover debt. The acquisition had been complicated. The Catholic diocese, facing financial crisis and declining attendance, had sold the building to a private foundation while retaining rights to hold services until a new church was built. The foundation, my foundation, though the ownership was buried under layers of LLCs and trust structures, had those papers reviewed by 3 different law firms. St. Catherine's was mine. The building, the grounds, the parking lot where Marcus's new Porsche would have gleamed on Christmas Eve. All mine. I'd bought it not as investment but as preservation. The cathedral was architectural history, built in 1889, featuring stained glass windows from a master craftsman whose work appeared in only 6 buildings nationwide. The city had been discussing landmark status, and I'd wanted to ensure the building survived regardless of the diocese's financial troubles. My lawyer had structured everything to stay anonymous. I attended services occasionally, sitting in the back watching light filter through windows I owned but no one knew about. It felt like having a secret, a private connection to beauty that needed no external validation. Now I sat at my desk reviewing the contract terms. The diocese's right to hold services was contingent on reasonable use that maintains the building's dignity and historical significance. Services, weddings, funerals, all allowed. But the contract included standard clauses about facility usage, scheduling, and the property owner's right to deny requests that might damage the structure or interfere with planned maintenance. I picked up my phone and called my property attorney, Daniel. Vanessa, good to hear from you. What's up? St. Catherine's Cathedral. I need to review our management agreement with the diocese. Papers rustled on his end. Kay pulling the file. What specifically? Their Christmas Eve service. Can we require them to relocate it? Long pause. Technically, yes, if we have legitimate property concerns. But Vanessa, that's a major service. Probably their biggest of the year. The PR would be. What if we're conducting a structural assessment? Emergency evaluation of the ceiling integrity. More silence. Then, is there actually a structural concern? There could be. That ceiling is 135 years old. When was the last comprehensive engineering evaluation? I'd have to check, but I don't think there's been one recently. His tone shifted, understanding dawning. You want to schedule an emergency inspection for Christmas Eve? I want to ensure the building's safety. If that requires closing the cathedral for evaluation during their planned service, that's unfortunate but necessary. The contract allows for emergency closures for legitimate maintenance concerns. Vanessa, this is going to make waves. Big ones. The diocese will push back hard, probably go to the media about the anonymous owner forcing them out of Christmas services. Let them. We're within our contractual rights. Schedule the inspection for December 24th, starting at 2 p.m. They'll need to relocate their 7 p.m. service. I paused. And Daniel, it's time to reveal the ownership. File the disclosure paperwork. Public record, full transparency. You sure? You've kept this quiet for 18 months. I'm sure. Do it today. After hanging up, I drafted an email to the diocese administrator, professional and apologetic, explaining the necessary structural evaluation and the unfortunate timing. Offered my foundation's assistance in securing an alternative venue. The community center 2 miles away had availability. Then I sat back and waited for the explosion. Took 6 hours. The diocese administrator called Daniel, who confirmed the inspection was legitimate and non-negotiable. The administrator apparently made calls up the chain looking for leverage to push back. That's when they ran into the ownership disclosure Daniel had filed. My mother called at 8 p.m., her voice shrill with panic. Vanessa, something terrible has happened. The cathedral is being closed Christmas Eve for some kind of inspection. They're saying we have to have services at the community center. The community center. Like we're some struggling parish instead of St. Catherine's. Do you know anything about this? Why would I know about it? You work in real estate. Can't you call someone? This is ruining Christmas. Marcus's fiancée's family is flying in. We've told everyone about the cathedral service. This is humiliating. I'm sure the community center will be fine, Mom. Fine? Vanessa, this is not fine. This is. She stopped abruptly. Muffled voices in the background. My father's voice, sharp and urgent. Then my mother, breathless. The diocese just sent an email. The cathedral owner is requiring the inspection. The owner is. They're saying it's owned by someone named Vanessa Chin. The silence stretched like taffy. Vanessa Chin, my mother repeated slowly. That's you. You own St. Catherine's Cathedral? I own the building, yes. Through a foundation I established. The diocese sold it last year to cover debts. You bought our church? I bought a historic building that needed preservation. The diocese retained service rights, which they still have. Just not on December 24th, because we're conducting a necessary structural evaluation. My father's voice erupted in the background, too muffled to make out words but not tone, fury and shock in equal measure. This is because of Christmas, my mother said, her voice dropping to something between accusation and realization. Because we didn't invite you. You're punishing us. I'm ensuring the safety of a 135-year-old building. The timing is unfortunate. Unfortunate. She laughed, high and brittle. You own the cathedral. You've owned it for over a year and you never told us. Never mentioned it. Let us keep attending services in a building you bought and we had no idea. You never asked what I did for work. You called it real estate nonsense, and changed the subject whenever I tried to explain my projects. Because you acted like you were barely scraping by. You dress like you shop at discount stores. You drive that old car. You live in that tiny house. How were we supposed to know you were buying cathedrals? By asking. by showing interest in my actual life instead of assuming my choices meant failure. My father took the phone. Vanessa, this is unacceptable. Closing the cathedral on Christmas Eve. Do you have any idea what this does to our standing in the community? To our family's reputation at St. Catherine's? Your standing. Your reputation. Not mine, because you uninvited me from Christmas to avoid the embarrassment of your unsuccessful daughter. That's not, we didn't, he stopped trapped. I have the email, Dad. Current life situation and career uncertainty. You decided I was too much of a failure to include in your accomplished family celebration. Now you're upset that your failure daughter owns the cathedral you plan to show off in. We need to talk about this. In person. As a family. I'm not family this Christmas, remember? Just immediate family, you said. I'm sure you'll have a lovely service at the community center. I hear they have folding chairs and decent acoustics. I ended the call before he could respond. The local news picked up the story by December 15th. Mysterious cathedral owner forces Christmas Eve closure. The diocese, desperate for sympathy, had gone public with their displacement, though they carefully avoided mentioning they'd sold the building to cover financial mismanagement. The Real story broke December 17th when an enterprising reporter traced the ownership through the LLCs to my foundation, then to me. Local real estate investor behind cathedral purchase. Ran with a photo they'd pulled from my company website. Professional, confident, completely at odds with my family's narrative about my struggling career. The story detailed my portfolio. 17 commercial properties, 3 historic building restorations, estimated net worth of $12 million. Quoted industry contacts who called me one of the sharpest investors in the region, and committed to preservation and community value. My phone exploded. Reporters requesting interviews. Old friends I hadn't heard from in years suddenly remembering we should catch up. My Aunt Rebecca, effusive and apologetic, saying she'd always known I was doing well and wasn't it terrible how the diocese had mismanaged things? Marcus called 5 times before I answered. V, I need to see you. Please. Can I come over? He arrived an hour later, still in his work suit, looking exhausted. I let him in, offered coffee he declined, and waited. I'm sorry, he said finally. For all of it. For not pushing back when they excluded you. For not calling them out on how they've treated you for years. For benefiting from being their golden child while you got dismissed and ignored. You didn't ask for that role. No, but I accepted it. I let them showcase my achievements while minimizing yours. I knew you were doing something significant with real estate. You tried to tell me about your projects and I nodded and changed the subject because I didn't understand it and didn't make the effort to learn. He rubbed his face. You own a cathedral, V. You've built something incredible and I never even asked for details. Most people don't want details about commercial property acquisition. Family should. I should have. He looked at me directly. The Christmas thing, I told them it was wrong. I said if you weren't invited I wasn't coming either. But Mom said you'd probably prefer not to come anyway, that you got anxious at family gatherings, and I believed her instead of calling you directly. That's on me. Something in my chest loosened slightly. You're coming around now because you found out I'm successful. I'm coming around now because I saw the news story and realized I've been complicit in treating you like you didn't matter. Success or not, that was wrong. But yeah, seeing that you own St. Catherine's, the place we grew up going to, it made me realize how completely I'd underestimated you. How much I'd bought into their narrative without questioning it. They're furious. They're humiliated. Dad's been calling everyone he knows in real estate trying to verify the story, figure out how you did it. Mom's been crying for 2 days about having to tell her friends they're using the community center for Christmas Eve. They're devastated their image took a hit. And you? He smiled sadly. I'm proud of my sister. And ashamed it took a cathedral to make me pay attention. Christmas Eve arrived cold and clear. I drove to St. Catherine's at noon, meeting the structural engineer I'd hired for the actual inspection. Yes, I'd scheduled it strategically, but the evaluation was genuine. The building needed assessment and I needed documentation of its condition. We spent 3 hours examining the ceiling, the support structures, the stained glass window mountings. The engineer took notes, photos, measurements. His preliminary assessment. Structurally sound, but several areas needed monitoring and eventual reinforcement. Legitimate concerns, proper maintenance. At 6 p.m. I drove past the community center. Cars packed the parking lot, people in their Christmas finest entering a building that looked exactly like what it was. A functional space, not a Gothic masterpiece. I saw my mother's car, my father's Mercedes, Marcus's new Porsche looking absurdly out of place. I continued to St. Catherine's, let myself in with the owner's key and sat in the empty sanctuary. Late afternoon light filtered through the stained glass, painting the pews in colors that had inspired devotion for over a century. The silence was profound, broken only by the occasional creak of old wood settling. My phone buzzed. Marcus, service is about to start. There's space if you want to come. I'd like you here. I typed back. I'm exactly where I need to be. Merry Christmas, Marcus. I sat in the cathedral I owned, in the building my family had attended for generations, never knowing it would someday be mine, and felt something settle in my chest. Not quite peace but close. Satisfaction maybe. Validation. They'd uninvited me from Christmas because I didn't fit their image of success. Now they were celebrating in a community center because I'd bought their precious cathedral and they'd never bothered to notice. The irony was exquisite. My phone buzzed again. My mother. We need to talk after the holidays. Please. I didn't respond. Instead, I walked to the front of the sanctuary, studying the altar my great-grandparents had donated in 1920. Family legacy literally carved in stone. They tried to erase me from their Christmas, from their narrative of family achievement. But I was embedded in this place now, permanently. The cathedral would stand for another century and my ownership, my preservation of this historic building, would be part of its story. Let them have their community center Christmas. Let them explain to their friends and Marcus's future in-laws why services had moved. Let them sit in folding chairs under fluorescent lights instead of beneath century-old stained glass. I had the cathedral. I had the satisfaction of their shock. I had proof that their assessment of my life had been catastrophically wrong. And I had Christmas Eve alone in a Gothic masterpiece, surrounded by beauty they'd taken for granted, that I'd valued enough to preserve. Merry Christmas to me.